Hello, honeybees. My name is Raven. This is Jasper, and this is October, and welcome back to our channel. Subscribe to become part of the hive. Be sure to like and ring the notification bell. Thanks, honeybees. Meow. So, it's October. Okay. So, it is spooky season. It's October. At the time I'm filming this, it is October 3rd, so we are in full swing, and October means Halloween, obviously, and that means Halloween movies, and there's a lot coming out in October that I'm really looking forward to. Mainly, to name a few, the new Hellraiser. I've watched all the Hellraisers before, and they all suck except for the first one, and this one looks promising, so I'm really excited to finally have another, good Hellraiser movie. Halloween Ends, Wendell and Wild with Key and Peele, a new Henry Selick stop-motion movie. He, of course, did Coraline, so and that's one of my favorites. I'm definitely really excited for that. However, in September, quite a few horror thriller type films have come out, and so today I want to talk about a couple of them. It's been a really good time for movies, definitely on the trajectory of a good ending of the year for film. It's definitely been ramping up kind of since the beginning of this year, and September was really great, and October looks really promising. So let's just get into it. I'm going to talk about 3 movies today that are kind of significant, I think, in a way. It doesn't necessarily mean they're all great movies, but they all kind of had a little bit of an impact on me or on culture, film culture this past month. In one way or another, and I'll kind of get into that with each one. One movie that I did see in September that I'm not going to talk about because it doesn't really fit the theme of the video is the movie Bros, with Billy Eichner, who also wrote it. I don't know if he wrote and directed it, but he made it. And I thought that was really good, really funny. I don't really have anything to say about it that other people haven't already said. I know it's not doing great at the box office, but I know that everyone, or most people I've seen who have saw it really, really liked it, and I really liked it too. So I definitely recommend that one. And now, finally, getting into the movies for the day. So the first one I want to talk about, I mentioned at the beginning of my Pinocchio review because my original plan was to do this movie and Pinocchio, but then of course Pinocchio ended up taking a lot more screen time with how much I had to say about it. But the movie Barbarian.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
This is 476 Barbary, right?
Yeah, I'm renting this place.
No, I booked it a month ago.
Are you sure you have the right place?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do?
Why don't you come inside and we'll call these idiots.
So Barbarian, I was really, really looking forward to from the trailer. What I really loved is that the trailer didn't really give too much away. The trailer just kind of suggested something sinister is happening, so you got the vibe of the film without them actually telling you anything that happens, basically other than what happens in the beginning, which we see right away, so it's not really a spoiler. And I was really excited also because Bill Skarsgård, who of course played Pennywise in It 2017 and It Chapter 2 2019, is in it. And I love him. I love those movies. Huge Pennywise fan, huge Bill Skarsgård fan. I love that he's getting into this horror niche. Obviously, his brothers are all super famous. Alexander Skarsgård, his dad, Stellan Skarsgård, and they're in all sorts of things, but he's kind of found this area of film, this little market where he's in horrors, and I love that. I love kind of when actors have their own niche that they're perfecting, that they're really, really good at, and he is really, really good at horror, whether he is the villain or not. Come to think of it, he's actually in this movie called Villains that I really like, where he's kind of an anti-hero, so that's a good one too. But Barbarian, so it's Bill Skarsgård and Georgina Campbell. Really, it's Georgina Campbell, who I wasn't really familiar with her work before, but she is really good in this film also, and it starts off with them. I say it's Bill and Georgina, but really it's just Georgina, and then we get other characters later on. We get Justin Long, which we know from the trailer that he's in it, but we don't really see a lot of his footage in the trailer. And Justin Long is, in my opinion, a very underrated horror king. He's in a lot of movies that aren't horror, of course. He's in a lot of comedies, but he was in Jeepers Creepers. He was in the film Tusk, which I didn't like the film Tusk, but he was really good in it. And part of the reason I didn't like it was because of how believable he was as this tortured person. It just made me really upset to see his reactions and his crying and wailing as this guy being turned into a walrus, which is a ridiculous premise, but he took it so seriously. And it was honestly, that performance at least was really, really good. So I was really happy to hear that he was in this movie because I do think of him as a horror king, but also a really funny comedic actor as well. So I was hoping they would kind of mesh that in this film. And they did. There was definitely some really funny parts that had the whole theater laughing. Lots of really funny dialogue that kind of coincided with the horror and terror and thrills that were happening. It meshed very well. It wasn't like comedy moment, horror moment. It kind of all went together, because there are times in like a highly suspenseful situation where you might say something out of fear and stress that ends up being really funny. So that's kind of where a lot of the humor came from, just because of how ridiculous everything that happens in the film. It's kind of those like, oh, what is this kind of like comedic moments, but we'll get into it. And from the trailer, I'd mentioned before how I love that they didn't give anything away. So from the trailer, I kind of built in my brain what this movie would be about. And you kind of see, I mean, I'll show the trailer. I probably showed it already. But with Georgina and Bill at this Airbnb, that's the opening scene, is she is staying at this Airbnb at night in Detroit. And someone's already staying there, and it's Bill Skarsgård. And then we see a staircase later on. So just from the trailer, I assumed this was going to be a kind of film where, you know, she stays in this Airbnb and then Bill Skarsgård is like very convincingly, we must have just been double booked. And then it turns out he's holding someone in the basement. And I assumed that person would be Justin Long, because we see him a little bit like screamy in the trailer, I think, just from what I remember. And I thought that that's what it was going to be. And then she was going to get trapped and would have to escape Bill Skarsgård, and he was going to be like the main villain of the movie. But that's not it at all. That's not it at all. He is a red herring, Bill Skarsgård's character, whose name is Keith, which is the grossest of male names. But besides that, I'm just going to call him Bill. So it does open that way, and it is a true mistake. This rental Airbnb company in this film really did mess up. They seem like not to be the most organized of companies, and double booked Georgina and Bill. And at first she's obviously like very wary of this, but she has no place to go. It's the middle of the night. There's no other places around. There's like a festival in town or something, so all the hotels are booked. So she stays, and Bill Skarsgård offers her the bedroom. She locks herself in. He's in the living room. But actually, before we even get to that point where they go to sleep, they have this connection. She insists on washing the sheets before she sleeps there. So while the sheets are washing, they're talking, they're drinking wine, they really connect. We find out that she's in town for an interview the next day to work with this documentary filmmaker. And he is in a band, and he's there kind of scoping out an area for them to kind of like stay and work on their next album or something like that. And it's a band that she knows, and her documentary that she's hoping to work on is kind of related to music. And so they connect, and they talk for hours and hours, and then they go to sleep, and there's some like creaks and bumps in the night and whatever. And so we kind of like right away get this like eerie feeling, and she goes to explore. I mean, I'm going to like kind of run through the summary here. I'm not going to go over every detail, but essentially she ends up in the basement, and she's trapped in there. And while Bill Skarsgård is not around after her interview, which goes really well, so she's back, and she just starts kind of exploring the basement because the door mysteriously closed and locked by itself. And she goes deeper and deeper in the basement and finds a door. And there's a room with a camera and a bed, and it's like dingy. And there's like a bloody handprint on the wall. So obviously she freaks out. There's this like dark hallway that looks like it goes on for miles. And she's just like, nope, I'm not going in there, which good decision. But then Bill Skarsgård comes back. He goes to explore it. Spoilers, by the way. I'm going to be spoiling all three of these movies. So skip to the next one if you haven't seen Barbarian, because I do recommend it. I do think everyone should watch it before knowing what happens, because that's a big part of why it was really good, is that I didn't see a lot of this coming. Anyway, basically, Bill Skarsgård starts to explore. She ends up following him against her better judgment because he's not coming out. And then she finds him way deep, like it goes on, like it's under the entire neighborhood, pretty much, this basement with how far it goes down. And you're just like, what is happening? And I'm on the edge of my seat. It is pitch black. And then we see this old woman coming out and just bashes Bill's head against the wall, and he's dead. And we don't see Bill anymore for the rest of this movie. And that's just kind of like the intro. But the shock of seeing this old naked woman, which, I mean, we can get into a whole thing about how like horror uses like old people like to be scary, and how kind of like insulting and ageist I'm sure that is like for older people. I know I would kind of be insulted if I was like a wrinkly old lady and they used me as a monster. But hey, another video in the future, perhaps. You know, it kind of reminded me of It Chapter 2. There's that scene where Jessica Chastain's character is visiting her old apartment, and now this old lady lives there. And while Jessica Chastain is like looking at pictures and whatever, the old lady is naked and kind of runs behind her in the background. And you see a quick glimpse of this scary naked old lady, and it's like with like a sound cue. It was like that. A lot of this film, when they're in the basement, it happens like throughout. It's not the whole movie is in there, but throughout it, when we are in this like dark hallway basement, it's pitch black, and they'll just have like a phone flashlight or a lighter or something small, and we'll just see flashes of this old lady and like slowly coming closer into the light. And it's so creepy with the lighting. The lighting design is incredible and really does a lot for the suspense and the thrills. So then we get Justin Long's character. Bill gets his head bashed, and then cut to Justin Long. He's definitely the comedy relief in this movie, which is not surprising because he is a comedic actor and also a horror actor. It just kind of fits. And we find out that he's this actor who's caught in a sexual assault scandal. Somebody said that he took advantage of her, and now he's being dropped from these projects, and it's this whole big news story. And basically he finds this out like all in one moment, and basically his life is over. Not really, but his career is like gonna tank overnight. And he's trying to do damage control, doesn't really know what to do, talking to his lawyers. His manager drops him. It's this whole thing. So he decides he needs money to kind of fight this and go to court. So he decides to sell some of his property that he has, and he happens to have property in Detroit that he rents out through a company, and it turns out to be that exact Airbnb company. So the house that Georgina and Bill were just in is actually Justin Long's house, and he just rents it out through this company. So he goes there, stays for a few days, kind of lies low while he thinks of his next steps, and then of course he stumbles into the basement as well. Now, let me just say, since Justin Long supposedly owns this house and has owned it for a while, I don't know how he didn't know that all of this was under his own house. It doesn't really matter because the movie is still good anyway. Normally, with my analytical brain, if a movie is good, I can overlook certain things that don't make a lot of sense. So I can overlook it. But also, it's just like, you didn't know that, because we find out later that it's not just the old woman who's under there. It's actually a very, very old man who is her dad, and she's the child of lots and lots of incest, where this old man, we see flashbacks later of like, I think it's like the 60s or 70s, or maybe even earlier, maybe in the 50s, of this Detroit neighborhood, back when it was like a real neighborhood, because at this point it's just this house and a bunch of rundown houses. So back when it was a whole neighborhood, and this man was there, and we see him buying like baby items and talking about with his neighbor how he's never going to leave the house because everyone else is starting to leave and he doesn't want to. So this old man lives under this house. He would kidnap women, assault them, have babies with them, and then assault the babies when they got older, have babies with the babies. It's this whole thing. And so this woman is a product of that, this old woman. And this has been happening under Justin Long's house for far longer than he's ever owned it. The only thing I can think of is that, like, if he's just buying a bunch of properties, he probably hasn't stayed at any of them for a very long period of time. He just, like, was available. I'm sure he got a good deal on it, and then he decided to rent it out and just get money. I'm sure he never like actually like lived there. He didn't like grow up there, from what I'm assuming. So it's fine. It's just interesting that like if I had a house, I would explore it. I would probably be able to find that door. I mean, to his credit, it was a hidden door that Georgina just happened to stumble upon. So whatever, beside the point. So Justin is in the basement, and he's also attacked by this old lady. And then we find out this old lady is kind of just kidnapping them to be a mother. She just kind of wants to be their mom. And there's this tape that we see the old man buy back in like the 50s or whatever about like how to bond with your baby and take care of your baby. And it's like a breastfeeding video. And so this old woman has been watching that in this dark basement on loop her entire life. And so she just wants to be a mom. And we find out Georgina is still alive because she let her baby her. She let her feed her with this disgusting bottle. The whole thing, it's very gross. This movie is pretty disgusting in some parts, especially all the stuff with the old lady. There's not a whole lot of violence. There's just enough to get you. The Bill Skarsgård scene, that one was pretty violent. And then there's a scene at the end that's pretty violent. But other than that, it's mostly dark suspense and anticipation, which is where we get the scares. And then a few like light jump scares here and there. By light, I mean like it's dark and then there's a light and then there's something there. And it worked. I thought it worked really well altogether. Like we didn't need a ton of violence. We didn't need a ton of blood and guts and gore for it to be scary. It was scary. It was fun. It was thrilling regardless of all that stuff. So anyway, Justin Long obviously does not want to be babied by this woman. Georgina's doing her best to survive, but Justin's trying to get out of there. There's this really like gross scene where the old lady tries to breastfeed him. So yeah. And then, I mean, long story short, they get out of there. The woman comes out of the house, chases them. And Justin Long at this whole time is kind of going through this internal thing of like, I did something wrong with his assault. I did something wrong, and I gotta fix it. He shoots Georgina by accident because he thinks she's the old lady, and he kind of has a crisis with that. Like, I hurt somebody, and I need to fix it, and relating back to his assault case. And so, you know, we think, or I thought watching this movie, okay, so this is his redemption arc. He's gonna turn it around. Turns out, nope. That's another twist. There's no redemption arc here. He throws Georgina off of a roof to try to get the old lady away from them because she chases them up this kind of water tower. And he thought, you know, it's either you or me. Throws her off. Old lady dives after her. And then another twist ends up saving Georgina by getting under her. And so Georgina lands on the old woman. And they actually both survive. Which is crazy that this old lady is still alive after falling from this building. You know, it's them incest genetics, you know, makes her super strong somehow. And so Justin Long comes down and immediately starts making excuses like, oh, you know, it was you or me. I didn't know what to do. I was just looking out for myself. And it's like, yeah, okay, we get it. This is this type of guy. He gets no redemption arc. This is how he is. And someone like this doesn't get a redemption. And that was also really interesting because normally I feel like that's like the typical formula, introducing him that way where he did like make this mistake, do this really terrible thing that he is denying, and then slowly is kind of like, yeah, maybe I did because maybe she did say no at first, but later, you know. And I thought like, okay, he's going to get this redemption. He's going to realize what he did wrong, but he didn't. And so he dies. The old lady gouges his eyes out. And then Georgina shoots her and gets away. And that's how the movie ends. But the whole thing altogether was just, it's not like, I mean, I want to say I was on edge the whole time. I wasn't. There was definitely some times where I was just like sitting back and just like watching. It was good. I don't know what else to say about it. It was good. It was thrilling. Everything I've said this whole time. If any of this sounds interesting to you, definitely go watch it. I mean, I'd hope you would watch it before you just watch this review just now because I just spoiled everything for you. But so if you have watched it, I hope you agree and thought it was really good because I definitely did. And I highly recommend this movie. I give it a 4 out of 5. Maybe even a 4.5. Like it was pretty good. It's pushing 4.5 for me. So the next movie I wanted to talk about is a little bit different, but impactful because there was a lot of drama surrounding it. And I feel like it was a highly anticipated movie because of all the drama surrounding it. And I am, of course, talking about Don't Worry, Darling.
I have it.
Focus, right here.
Let's have a little drink. Yeah, I will.
You and me.
Always. You and me.
So Don't Worry, Darling, written and directed by Olivia Wilde, who of course previously made Booksmart, a movie that I really like. It's a comedy, it's a coming of age, it's LGBT romance, it's a whole lot of things, and it's really good and sweet, a very comfy, nice, fun movie. And so this Don't Worry, Darling is Olivia's attempt at a thriller, and it was kind of marketed as a thriller. Some people were saying it's a horror. It's definitely not. I think there's kind of a fine line that is kind of hard to tell sometimes, but it's definitely not a horror. It's a thriller. It's kind of like a sci-fi thriller, but we don't really get like the sci-fi stuff like until the end. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint, honestly. It's really more of a drama than anything, to be honest with you. It's a drama with some thrilling elements. So I'm not really going to talk about the drama. I did already kind of talk about it in the first episode of my podcast, Tea with Honey, which is new. If you haven't listened to it yet, definitely go check it out. There's 3 episodes thus far, and there's going to be way more. So, and I do talk about like movie stuff like this sometimes. Check that out if you want to get caught up on the Don't Worry, Darling drama, but I feel like a lot of us already know it already. But I really just wanted to talk about the movie itself, because that's what's important to me. I don't really care about what surrounds a movie. But I do think that encouraged a lot of people to see it, just to see like what the drama was all about, you know? And the movie itself wasn't bad. I saw a lot of reviews before I saw it, like pre-screening reviews of people who said it was just terrible. And there was like some clips that surfaced before the movie actually came out of Harry's character, and there was an out of context clip, and everyone thought, oh, he's so terrible. He couldn't even do an American accent because he is British in the movie, but that doesn't matter. I mean, people are British and live in America, you know? I don't care. And that he was terrible, and like, how could he go up against Florence Pugh and possibly be a good actor? And, you know, partially that's true, because you have someone who's not an actor, Harry. He's only been in one movie. He was in Dunkirk, and he wasn't even a main character. And then now suddenly he's the leading role against Florence Pugh, who is a master at horror acting. She's incredible in Midsummer, and, you know, she was in Little Women, and she's in a whole bunch of stuff. A range, not just horror, but she has a wide range, and she's a very like emotional actor. Something that I really like about her is she's very like, her emotions are very believable. She can really like scream and cry, and you feel it and you get chills, which is something I loved and hated about Midsummer. I loved it because of how good she was in it, but I hated it because of how horrible it made me feel. So yeah, I mean, if you put someone who's not an actor against someone who's an amazing actor, they're not really going to look great in comparison. But that's not really Harry's fault. It was a strange casting choice to put him in there. I think we all understand why. I mean, you know, Olivia and Harry are dating. It was originally supposed to be Shia LaBeouf in that role, and he dropped out. And, you know, Harry's the age range. He's a good-looking guy. Put him in the movie, I guess. And, you know, he wasn't bad. Everyone's saying he's horrible. I don't think that's true. Even in comparison to Florence Pugh, who of course is great and will steal the show every time, which she does. I mean, this movie is definitely about her. So she's definitely the main character, and he's her supporting character as her husband, and everyone else are the supporting characters around her, because it's about her and her journey through this film. So, I mean, anyone in comparison to her is not going to be that great unless they're, like, completely on her level, which not a lot of people are, you know. But given that, I don't think Harry did that bad. He definitely did his best. It was clear he was trying. It was clear he gave it his all, which I really respected. He definitely wasn't like, you know, I'm not an actor, so I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to phone it in. No, he tried. No, he really tried. There's there was a few scenes where he had to be really emotional and he had to really show some range. And there was a few of them he didn't quite get there. You could tell he was trying, but he didn't quite get there. And I think that's okay, given what we know, like the outside context, that he's not an actor, that he hasn't done this sort of thing before. He did good for what he could do, if that makes any sense. But there was one scene in particular, a scene where they're in a car and she's being unbrainwashed, which I'll get into what the movie's actually about in just a second. But there's a scene where she's kind of waking up from this brainwashing and she's like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. She like doesn't trust whatever. She's like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. And they're in the car and he is in there crying because she has to be taken away to be re-brainwashed, and he's like screaming and crying and saying like, I'm sorry, I have to do this, but I have to, I'm sorry. And she's like, she's also screaming, and they're both just screaming, and they kind of like go together emotionally. They both kind of hit that same range, and they both gave what needed to be given in that scene. And he was very believable. Like I was there with him, and I felt bad for both of them. Even not knowing the full context at the time, it was like, you know, they're both going through something emotional, and I believe it. So that was really good. He actually did pretty good. And not just that scene, but a lot of scenes. And some of them, yeah, could have been better. But again, he's not an actor, so I don't know what other people are expecting from him. I know you think like if you put someone in a movie, they should be good. Yeah, that's true. But also context is important, and given the context, he did really good. Outside of that, if we didn't know who he was and didn't know that he wasn't an actor, I still wouldn't really have thought twice about his performance, to be honest with you. I thought it was fine. I thought it was just fine. The movie itself was just fine, so it's not like I was like expecting incredible performances from a subpar film, you know? So let's just talk about what happens in the movie. I'll try to run through this one quicker than I did with Barbarian, but essentially it's like Stepford Wives. It's pretty much Stepford Wives. I thought it was going to be more like The Village. So it's that kind of like trope where the characters are in an environment that is very specially curated. It's not real. It's all a simulation. It's the Matrix, kind of. Florence Pugh and Harry Styles are a married couple living in this like 50s style town with all these other 50s couples. Nick Kroll and Olivia Wilde are a couple, which Nick Kroll in this film, he wasn't in it a whole lot. So I was kind of like, why is he in it if he's really not going to do anything? But, you know, maybe, you know, Olivia's friends with Nick Kroll, so he plays her husband. I wanted to do more with him, I think is what I'm saying. I like Nick Kroll, and I wanted more, you know. He definitely could have been more of the comic relief character than he was. There really wasn't a comic relief character, and maybe she didn't want one. But there was comedy. Really, Olivia was the comic relief. Olivia Wilde plays Florence Pugh's best friend in the film. Olivia's name is Bunny in it. I don't remember anyone else's names, but I remember her name was Bunny. And Bunny is like the gossipy best friend. Like, oh, I have so much to tell you. Did you hear? She was doing this with his husband. Oh my God. Like that kind of character. And so a lot of like the comedy came from their conversations. I feel like Olivia Wilde is really great at comedic dialogue and relationships between characters. That was like a really good part about Booksmart, was the dialogue, was the script. And so I thought that was pretty good for a lot of Don't Worry Darling as well. But the story itself, it's kind of like an unraveling discovery story. Florence Pugh kind of starts seeing stuff. First, there's this other character who kind of is like, why are we here? We're going crazy. They all kind of live in this like commune led by Chris Pine, who also did really well. He was really great at this kind of like manipulating cult leader type character. Definitely a gaslighter. And I don't use that term lightly. That's literally what he was. It was the kind of character to be like, well, why do you think that? Who said it was like that? I think you need to lie down.
Delusions, memory problems, hysteria. We saw these issues with Margaret and know that it's completely curable. Dr. Collins prescribed you a suite of medications which you were clearly not taking. The question is why?
He's lying to us. He's lying to all of us.
Alice, Bunny, your best friend, is worried about you. She thinks that you need help. Is that why she's not here tonight? Because you didn't want to be reminded.
He's using you. He's using all of us. Do you even know what the Victory Project actually is? Have you ever asked?
Do you?
you're upsetting your husband. You sound crazy right now. Like that kind of guy. And he did really well in that. And he looks great. The whole movie looks great. The best part is the visuals, for sure. I like the costumes. I like the setting. And I liked just how everything looked. It's just the story itself was honestly unoriginal. Back to my summary. They're in this like town and everything's perfect. They're like the perfect couple, and then like their friends are all perfect couples, and then one woman in one of these couples kind of goes a little bit crazy, and everyone's like, oh, nothing's wrong, she's just sick. She tries to commit suicide. Florence sees it, but everyone assures her that she didn't. Like, oh, she just fell. She didn't actually kill herself. And she's like, no, like I saw her. She like slit her throat, and then she fell out the roof. And they're like, no, it was an accident. She fell through a window. It's fine. So the whole town really is gaslighting her, but like they're being brainwashed too. Some of them, which we'll get into. And so it's kind of her going on this journey of like what is going on, and she goes to basically. The women, it's a 50s thing, so the women stay at home and clean and wait for their husbands to come home. The husbands are all gone all day working and then come back in the evening. And so she goes out to a place where she's not supposed to go, which is kind of the place where supposedly all the men work. And she finds this weird building and she like looks in it. And then after that, something like awakens inside of her. She's starting to get these like memories where she's not sure where they're from or when they happen. She's seeing things. There's this really great image of when she's in her dance class with all the other wives, and then the wife that had tried to kill herself / fell out of a window is like banging her head against the other side of the mirror, and only Florence Pugh can see it. So it's one of those moments where she's like screaming and being like, what's that? And no one else can see it. So they're all looking at her like she's crazy. And so she starts to think, am I crazy or is this real? She challenges Chris Pine's character for a moment. She figures out that all the wives kind of have similar stories of how they met their husbands. They're all from generally the same areas, and it's just kind of weird. It's kind of suspicious. Like they have all these shared memories. All their experiences are pretty much the same. All their lives are pretty much the same. And she's trying to crack it, but she doesn't actually know, so she can't actually crack it, and challenging Chris Pine doesn't really work. And it just gets deeper and deeper. That scene I mentioned earlier in the car is when she thinks she's discovered what's going on, in that everybody's trapped there, and she assumes that Harry, her husband, is also trapped there, and she doesn't trust what's going on. It's called the Victory Project, where they live, and Chris Pine, like I mentioned, is the leader, and she's like, I don't trust them. Something weird is happening here. We just need to get out of here. And so she tries to get out, and then turns out Harry knew something weird was happening the whole time, because it's his fault that she's there, and she gets re-brainwashed, but it doesn't really work. She kind of gets triggered by these memories, and just kind of unlocks everything. And I assumed it would be kind of like The Village, where they're in this like 50s town, but really it's modern day, and it's just like a cult. It's just like a cult where they're like trapped in the 50s town and forced to live this way, and everyone is brainwashed into thinking that this is the actual time period and how they're supposed to live. And it's kind of like that, but it's actually more than that. It is just a simulation. Florence Pugh is laying in a bed in a dingy apartment with these like weird goggles, projecting her brain into this life 24/7 all the time. And Harry, her husband, signed up for this. He was like, we see him previously in flashbacks where Florence Pugh is actually a doctor, and she works these long hours, so she doesn't really have time for her husband, and he is unemployed on the computer, like listening to these like Victory Project podcasts from cult manipulator Chris Pine, saying that like this is the best way to do it, you know, where going back to a place where wives take care of their husbands and you're together and in love, and Harry really wants that because his wife is never home. And yeah, so Harry signs him and his wife, Florence Pugh, up for this without her knowledge. So she's like chained to this bed with these goggles on all the time. He gets to leave when he goes to work. When the husbands all go to work, they're actually getting out of the simulation, going to work in the real world to either, I don't know, pay rent on the dingy apartment they have to keep their bodies in, or to pay for the technology for the Victory Project. It's not really clear. It doesn't really matter. And then in the evening, they get to come back, lay next to the bodies of their wives, and then project themselves into the simulation. So he goes out during the day in the real world, does his thing, and then comes back and gets to live in this perfect life with his doting wife who is in love with him and has time for him, and what he wasn't getting before, but it's against her will. And she discovers this and ends up killing him. just in a crime of passion, really. He's trying to get her to stay and convince her that this is the best life to have. And she's, rightfully so, like, I didn't make this decision. I liked working. I liked my life before. Just because it didn't work for you doesn't mean it didn't work for me. You don't get to decide what's best for me. Which, again, I mean, is a good message, but also a message that's been done. I mean, and the premise itself, like, it's all a simulation. Like, we all know that that's a trope. So, again, unoriginal. The way it was portrayed was just fine. It was, it wasn't terrible. It was just nothing new, So, yeah, and then it ends with her, like, escaping, and basically like dark screen, and then her like suggesting that she woke up from her goggle simulation with dead Harry Styles next to her, I guess, because if you die in the simulation, you die in the real world. And then another little twist is that Olivia Wilde's character knew that this was a simulation. Most of the wives don't. And then the husbands are the ones that put them there. And it's suggesting that either their real wives can do it, or they can just like pick a random woman to be their wife, and then they give them like memories of like how they met and got married and blah, blah, blah. And also like all the children in this world aren't real. And that's why Olivia Wilde's character is in it, because it's also like heavily suggested that her real children died, and so she's in this world so she can be with them again, even though they're not real. They're simulated children. And that was interesting, I guess. But yeah, and then the movie ends. And Chris Pine gets murdered by his wife as she's escaping, but the details don't matter. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it, is that like it wasn't really a unique idea. It wasn't original. It was just okay. There were some parts of the story where it was a little drab and it dragged on. It took a while to get like at all exciting. I liked the third act when we like know what's going on and Florence Pugh is like facing it and trying to get out of it. That part was like genuinely exciting. Nothing was like really thrilling or suspenseful. Nothing was scary for sure. There really wasn't a lot of scares or blood or anything like that, or anything that would be considered, thrilling, what I would want to see in a thriller. That's why I say like it's really just a drama with a little bit of like thrilling peppers with a little spice of thrills here and there, So yeah, that's Don't Worry Darling. It was just okay. Definitely elevated by Florence Pugh's performance. And I give that one, generously, I give it a 3 out of 5. But one thing I wanted to mention before I move on to the last movie is the marketing for Don't Worry Darling. Outside of the drama, the marketing was like very sexual. That was part of the drama, was that like the trailer itself, like half the trailer is like sex scenes or like that Florence and Harry making out, and Olivia like talked about how she was focusing like on the sex in the marketing and how it's all about women and only women come in this movie, and Florence was like, well, I don't understand why we would just be focusing on the sex scenes when that's not what the movie's about at all. And it's really weird that they did that, because the sex scenes, there's only 2, and they're both very short. Like, they cut off after not long. It's not graphic or explicit at all. And it only happens in the first act. There's 2, like, short sex scenes where not a lot of sex actually happens. Like, Harry eats out Florence, but she's, like, fully clothed. And then another one, they're, like, making out and about to have sex, and it cuts before we see anything. And that's it. So it's like... That was also why I almost didn't watch the movie, because it looked like it was just going to be lots of like unnecessary sex scenes, but it wasn't. And so the marketing was kind of weird for that. Like, I don't understand. And also the whole notion of like, oh, this is about women and women pleasure. But really it's about women being trapped by their husbands so that they can serve them. So that was also really weird that would have been part of the marketing. But whatever. Do your thing. I'm excited to see what genre Olivia Wilde chooses to tackle next. Okay, last film I want to talk about today is Smile.
What is it you like to talk about?
Hi, patient. Hi. I know you're nervous. I just want to have a chat.
I'm seeing something no one else can see except for me. It's smiling at me.
Was that scary? So Smile is, I don't even really know where to start with Smile. So Smile is about this emergency room psychiatrist doctor. Her name is Rose. And basically she gets cursed with this like smile curse. This patient comes in, she had just witnessed a suicide, and now she's like seeing things. And obviously Rose, being a psychiatrist, is like, it's not real, it's just in your brain, let's maybe get you some meds. And of course, and the patient is so insistent, like, no, it's real, and nobody believes me. And then she kills herself right in front of Rose, and now Rose gets this smile curse that this patient had, but she doesn't know that that's what happened, obviously, until she starts seeing weird things, and she starts like, oh, the patient smiled at her. I mean, we've all seen the trailer. I just played it just now, where the patient like smiles at her all creepy, and then she's starting seeing all these creepy smiles around. And I guess it's kind of like It Follows or something akin to that, where it's just something that follows you around until you pass it on to somebody else. Also kind of like that terrible The Ring remake from a few years ago, Rings, where you watch the video and then you're going to get killed unless you show the video to someone else. You have to pass it on. But the way this curse gets passed on is when you kill yourself in front of somebody else. Basically, this entity, this smile entity that poses as other people, kind of wears other people like masks to try to get into your head and makes you see things, wants to kind of infect you basically and take you over, and then makes you kill yourself in front of somebody else, and then the curse moves on to that person, which, interesting. It was genuinely scary. No, okay, for this one, the trailer, I thought it was going to be like stupid, dumb slasher horror, and I was excited about it for that because I really like that stuff. I mean, I kind of like the Bye-Bye Man, even though I hated the Bye-Bye Man, but like something like that's just like stupid, and it looked like it was going to be more fun than that. But turns out it was a very poignant commentary on mental illness that was actually quite deep and got me kind of emotional, actually. So Rose, we find out, witnessed her mother overdosing when she was a child, and that's kind of where her own personal trauma stems from. It's what led her to being a psychiatrist, to kind of prevent that from happening in the future. And it's a kind of this demon that she has to face while she's going through this curse, because she starts to like hear her mother, she starts to like see people and things, and she does things that she doesn't know that she's doing. Like she wraps up her cat in a gift when she thinks she's wrapping up a toy train, and gives it to her nephew. So her nephew opens this dead cat on his birthday, and everyone's like, why would you do that? You're crazy. And she's freaking out like, it wasn't me. I didn't do that. It's that thing that did it for her or made her do it without her knowledge. And of course, as this ramps up, nobody believes her. And it's all so real to her. And, from a deeper perspective, it could be real, it could be not. It could just be a mental illness, but in the context of the film, it's a curse that everyone else just thinks is a mental illness. Even her fiance is like, I know you had trauma in the past. I know your mom was like really sick mentally, and that's why she became a drug addict and overdosed. And that stuff's probably genetic, so I think it's catching up to you. And she's like, wait, what? Like... And she's not taken seriously by anybody, which, again, is a very poignant commentary on people with mental health issues and how things can be so real and scary to them, but nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to take them seriously or brush it off or just give them meds. Or, you're normal for a while and you're able to, like, act accordingly and do what you're supposed to do, but then as soon as the mental illness peeks through a little bit too much, even your closest friends and loved ones don't want to deal with you anymore, because they know you have these issues, but they don't want to deal with the actual like consequences of the issue, which is something that I've dealt with in my own life with my own kind of mental things happening. Like, it's easy to say, like, I have anxiety, I have agoraphobia, but as soon as I'm like too scared to go outside and just feel a feeling of dread, and I just don't want to leave the house for no rational reason, suddenly I'm being ridiculous. I'm too scared to drive. I didn't learn how to drive until I was 18 because I was just too scared. And I try to explain that to people, and oh, you're just ridiculous, nothing's going to happen to you. And it's like, yeah, I know that consciously, but my brain tells me something really bad is going to happen. While I'm driving, my brain won't stop creating car crashes in my mind, and I can't help it. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but to me it's very real and it's very scary. And that's what is kind of happening in this movie. It is, to her, very real and affecting her, and she needs help, and nobody will help her. Except for her ex-boyfriend. His name is Joel in the movie, is the only one who even tries to help. And it's because he sees a lot of the evidence. We find this pattern of people killing themselves in front of somebody else, and then that person later kills themselves in front of somebody else, who then later on and on and on and on. And she finds out that one person, the one person out of like 20 that survived this, killed somebody else instead of himself, and then passed it on to the witness to that murder. And she thought, well, I can't kill somebody, so that doesn't really help me. She later goes into isolating herself, which is another thing, going back to the mental illness thing. In the film, it's a curse that makes you kill yourself, but in real life, a mental illness that can stem from, it's a cycle. It can stem from your genes genetically, or from witnessing trauma, and traumatized people may end up traumatizing somebody else just because of their brain chemistry, because of their own trauma. You see someone kill themselves, you're traumatized for that, and then you do it, and so on and so, or you witness something traumatizing, and then it affects you so much that you end up accidentally traumatizing other people and spreading it. That's kind of what happened with her nephew, where she wrapped up the dead cat, and then now her nephew's kind of traumatized from having to open the dead cat on his birthday. So it can be passed on in multiple ways, and it's a cycle that's really, really hard to get to end. And so a lot of people with these mental illnesses, that loneliness, that isolation, and nobody believing them, and they just feel like such a burden, to a point where they think the only solution is to either take your own life or be alone forever so that you can't burden or hurt anybody else. And that's kind of what she tries to do. She goes to this old house that she used to live in, where her mother died, and she kind of tries to face this trauma, face her demons, if you will. And the smile curse takes the form of her mom, and in a very scary way. This part, she turns into a monster, which is the only time that happens in the movie. And I mean, sidebar, the special effects in this movie are not good. Like, the CGI looks kind of unfinished, but beside the point, it's still good. Otherwise, that wasn't the focus of the movie. It's just something I wanted to mention as one critique. But anyway, she faces this trauma against her mother. Her mother is saying, this is your fault. You could have saved me. And she's saying, no, I was a kid. I wasn't responsible for you. It wasn't my fault. And it's like she's realizing that for the first time. And she's finally trying to fight this trauma that she's been avoiding by trying to help other people fight their trauma her whole life. And she's facing it. But then we find out that, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes facing your trauma, facing your demons doesn't cure you. And it's still there. The illness is still there. And it was. And she ends up letting the smile curse take her over after she thought she defeated it. She thought she burned it all down. Turns out that was just a vision, and she didn't actually do that. And it takes her over. And she takes her own life in front of her ex-boyfriend, who's trying to help her, and it passes on to him. And then the film ends. And that was really tough to sit through, because you want to root for her and think, yes, she's finally doing it. She's finally attacking these demons. She's facing it, and she's going to overcome it, and the cycle ends with her. But that's not how that works, as much as we think so. I mean, in a movie, yeah, but not in real life. And that's what this film was illustrating. In the real world, you can face your trauma, you can go to therapy, you can accept that it wasn't your fault, but it's still there. And most times, it will never go away. And it might end up taking you over anyway. And that's what happens. And I was really upset about it. But it was still good. I mean, just getting the message, I was just kind of blown away at this movie. I was going into it thinking it's going to be this dumb slasher horror supernatural, and then getting this really smart commentary about mental health and the stigma around it, and what other people go through because of that stigma, but wrapped in this really fun thriller, actually, with a cool villain, and really and honestly very scary scenes. So like the fear kind of comes from two different places, right? The fear comes from, on a movie level, there are jump scares. They mess with the lighting, kind of like I mentioned in Barbarian, very dark scenes where you kind of see a shadow of something and you're not sure what it is. And the Smile character that's super creepy that like jumps out and anyone could be real and anyone could be fake and you like don't know. But also the fear comes from just feeling bad for these characters and this hopelessness, like nobody believes you and you see it and you can touch it and it's right there in front of your face, but nobody else can see it. Nobody else knows it's there and nobody believes you. As rational as you are, like she's a doctor, she's smart, she's respected in her field, but still, and she's using all this logic, but still nobody believes her, even with evidence that normally people with mental illness don't have. And she had it, and nobody believes her. And that's very scary, and that's a very lonely feeling that you get. So it's definitely a multi-level thrills, multi-level scares, multi-level like inner turmoil that like I felt while watching this movie. And the dark parts that I mentioned before, there's like a bunch of scenes where she's like alone in her house and it's dark, and if it were me, I would probably turn all the lights on to like feel better. That's usually what I do when I'm scared home alone, but this is a movie and it wouldn't have been scary if they did that. So but I was getting Night House vibes. If anyone's seen the Night House that came out, I believe last year, it was one of the best movies of the year for me. Very suspenseful scenes of like dark in the house and just hearing sounds, and it's quiet. Like that's a big part of the sound design, is sometimes there's no sound at all, and so you're just waiting because something's gonna happen, but you don't know what it's gonna sound like, what it's gonna look like, where it is, when it's gonna happen, and you're just waiting. And that's very scary. So I definitely thought about the Night House during that, because that's something that the Night House did really well too. So Smile. I've gone on about these movies for way too long now, probably, but I'll wrap it up here. Those are my thoughts on Barbarian. Very good. Don't Worry, Darling, just okay. And Smile, very good. I give Smile a 4 out of 5. And I definitely recommend seeing Barbarian and Smile. I'd hope you'd see them before watching this very spoilery review, because they're definitely better that way. Don't Worry, Darling, I don't think it really it matters as much. I mean, I watch it when it streams, I guess, if you wanted to see the hype, but whatever, it's fine. The other two, really, really good, so definitely highly recommend. And that's all I have for today. I'm looking forward to seeing you all throughout October, talking about all sorts of scary stuff, playing some scary games, watching scary movies, maybe even I'll try my hand at reacting to scary things, who knows, but I'm excited. Happy spooky season, everyone. I'm Raven Honey. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Thanks for watching, honeybees. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye! Meow!